Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. New right-wing conservative outrage of the day. Oh my goodness, hair on fire. The Biden administration said liberal world order. Oh my God. End of society as we know it. Oh, conservative world losing their mind. And what's interesting is watching the left kind of play into it. Oh my gosh, oh, that's not what he meant. Just shut up already. Stop with the right-wing outrage candy. Because you know what we're doing? We fall into this. Oh, they're outraged. There's the liberal world order. No, if liberal world order means fighting a fascist like Putin and standing up for democracy, then, well, maybe we should be doing that. Nobody's questioning the fact that the voices pushing this garbage, pro-Putin. These are the folks who say, no, we shouldn't be doing anything helping the Ukrainians fend off the Russians. No, we shouldn't do anything. No, we should give them nothing. No support, nothing. No. How come nobody calls them out for that? And remember, these are supposed to be the people who believe in democracy. These are the people who are supposed to be, pro-military. Because understand, Putin's not just going to stop in Ukraine. No. He wants to get the old band back together. Which is why Europe's coming together going, uh-oh, bad. We've got to do something. And yeah, they have to do something too. But we have to play a part in this. And to watch the right-wing outrage machine talk about, oh my gosh, inflation, the inflation's so bad. Like it only affects us. I get tons of emails from people. How come I never hear you talk about gas prices, huh? Talk about gas prices. Talk about the fact that we haven't done anything over the last 30 years to get off the stuff. I've been saying for all the years I've been doing this gig, hey, wouldn't it be a great idea if we had alternative transportation? Wouldn't public transit be a good idea? Get me out of my car and get me to work where I need to go. Help me take trips in ways that are, I don't know. So I'm not a slave to the pump? No, we can't talk about that. No, liberal world order. I mean, I gotta be 50 emails from people going, what are you going to say about that, huh? I'm not going to say anything about it because it's not worth being outraged over. What you should be outraged over is the fact that the Republican Party, the party of Putin, what you should be outraged over is we had a former president who wanted his number 2 hung, wanted to have the armed insurrectionists closer so he could get a better photo op, who we now see actually did kind of. If you look at the video, there was some scuffling going on in that car. He kind of maybe did in his own way try to go after the front seat of the car. Now, who knows what that meant, but there was movement. And again, the lie, very predictable. And we fall for it every single time because it's what we do. And they know this, which is why they lie so freaking always. And, we don't talk about, why is our supply chain broken? Why is inflation happening? We just go, it's Joe Biden's fault. You go, no, it's not Joe Biden's fault. It's 40 years of horrible policy. It's 40 years of supply-side voodoo Reaganomics. It's 40 years of pro-business, conservative, neoliberal governance. It's 40 years of let the smart people run things. Let corporate America have all the control. Let mass consolidation happen. Yeah, let them buy each other up. Let the big fish eat the little fish, because that's capitalism, Rick. You know that. It's the natural order of things. The strong survive. Yeah, and then what happens when the strong survive? They bully everybody else. And that's what happened. Congratulations, we are now being bullied by capitalism. And this is what's going on. And so I get emails from people going, hey, how come Joe Biden isn't doing anything about this or about that? Or you go, and exactly how do you expect that to happen? Maybe learn how our political system works and then go, hey, maybe that's why that isn't happening. I had somebody email me today, how come Democrats and Joe Biden haven't overturned the bad free trade deals from the 80s and 90s? Because there's a lot of other stuff going on. But I would love you to come join the coalition of people who want to change the world in a more positive direction, because this is an important issue too. Yeah, I'm with you. Let's undo the horrible of the 80s and 90s with our trade policy. Let's reshore manufacturing. Let's bring that back together. Yeah, do I have a problem that the Democratic Party is no longer the party of working people? Yeah. Do I have a problem that the Republicans are trying to pivot to project that they might be interested in pretending like they care about working people? Yeah, because I'm afraid we're stupid enough to fall for it. That's what the problem I have is. I've had people go, well, we put all this effort into abortion. How about we put it into, I don't know, bringing our jobs back? Yeah, I'm with you. But we can do both. See, this is the great thing about having a human brain. It's capable of doing more than one thing. I believe that. Fully believe that. Problem is the right is so much better at this. They're so much better funded, so much more organized, so much more on task, if you will. The left, full of cause heads. And I go back to this. Everybody's got a cause. Everybody's pushing their issue, their one thing, and not getting that they overlap. And I'm hoping we are in this moment where I think a lot of people are starting to go, wait a second, we're all under attack. I'm hoping that this is where we go. Because understand, abortion is not my issue. Abortion is not an issue I like talking about. Abortion is not an issue I've ever wanted to talk about. Abortion is not an issue that I like to even know that exists. But I understand how it overlaps into so many other things. I understand how it affects my daughters. I understand how it's going to affect the next generation. I understand how it's going to affect the workplace. I understand how it's going to affect the future of this country and the future of movement across states. The division of our country. It's an important issue. It's a good place to go, hey, maybe we can bring other people into this. Same thing with the labor issue. Labor is a big issue. Brings a lot of people in. Good way to build coalitions, to get out of our silos and talk to other people. Now, understand, there are a number of people who are fives, and I deal with fives very, very simply. I ignore them. The fives, they send me, when you make a declarative statement, you're a moron, and all right, thanks, bye. I don't have time for you. But for people who are saying, hey, we need to change things. Hey, this is something I see is wrong, but here, this is a direction we need to go. There's an opportunity for conversation and to get people together. This is a moment where the attacks are coming fast and furious from every direction. And this Supreme Court are activist judges. Remember that? Remember when the right made that, when the conservatives made that their rallying cry? Activist judges. They want kids to get educations. They want women to have choice. They want families to have choice. They want kids to have food, those activist judges. Now we're going to force women to have children that, they can't afford and we're not going to take care of. Well, not all of them anyway. A certain chosen few will be okay. The rest will just be cheap labor. And for those who remember Tom DeLay, remember the Hammer? Former Speaker of the House, disgraced, he gave a little spiel a number of years back on the abortion issue, because again, this has been their focus for a very long time. And abortion being part of their agenda, can do a bunch of different things and are. Oh, just wait. During his spiel, he went on to say, if abortion were illegal, and understand this is the thinking, how many of those white babies would we have, and how many of those would be out picking picking cotton and picking fruits and vegetables and picking things in the fields, and we wouldn't need those people south of the border. We wouldn't need the immigrants because we'd have enough cheap labor right here at home. Homegrown cheap labor. And you go, gee, that sounds like an agenda. And it is an agenda. And when you look at what our Supreme Court is going to do, and look at from the frame of how this is going to affect you and your family, how it's going to affect us in the working class. This is a massive transfer of power, an enormous transfer of power from we the people, working people like you and me, to the handful, to the very wealthy, the well-connected, the very powerful. That's what the EPA case was. That's what the abortion rulings was. Because understand, do you really think, do you think, come with me on this. Do you think a congressman, I don't know, maybe one from Tennessee who knocks up his mistress, do you think he's going to want her to going to have that child, ruin his political career? Or is he going to figure out how to quietly usher her out of the country or to a state where it's a safe haven, where get the care that she wants and needs? How do you think that's going to work out? All the while in public pointing his finger at that poor single mother going, you. It's the world we're in, man. And it's horrible. Now, some good news. President Biden's approval rating has gone up. He's up to 40%, which is way above Congress. In Congress, their approval rating is usually somewhere around syphilis or bed bugs, down around 19% approval for Congress. The Supreme Court has their approval rating dropping a little below Joe Biden's. Curiously enough, gee, who knew when you do unpopular things like say everyone can have guns and carry them concealed and no more choice, no more privacy for you women, that their popularity would go down 36% of job approval. And that 36% number seems to keep popping up. Right around the Trump support number, right around I would argue right around the crazy part of the country. I'm going to go with that number. About 36%. Those are our fives. The rest of the folks we can move on from. So I got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break, right back on the other side. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. If you missed any portion of the program, podcast, make sure you grab that wherever you get your favorite podcast. Like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment or two. Love to see that as well. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1922. That was the day that railroad workers across the United States walked off the job. During World War I, the railroads had been nationalized by President Woodrow Wilson. Seen as a vital cog of the war machine, the railroads were to be kept running no matter what. Because they were essential to the war effort, this gave railroad workers leverage. They won the 8-hour workday and improved working conditions. But when the war ended, railroads went back under private control. The seat at the table with management quickly was pulled out from under labor. The private owners eliminated Sunday and holiday overtime pay. Then wages were slashed for many railroad workers. The railroad companies promised the Big Four unions that no further cuts were coming. These included the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, the Brotherhood of Firemen and Engineermen, the Order of Railroad Conductors, and the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen. A strike vote was held across the industry. The Big Four voted not to strike, but the other unions decided to walk off the job. The response by the companies and the government was swift and brutal. A federal court issued an injunction against the strikers. They were prohibited from even talking about the strike to the press. Thousands of company gun thugs and National Guard troops were mobilized against the strikers. 10 workers were killed. With both guns and the courts lined up against them, the railroad workers did not stand much of a chance. The strike was defeated. The failed strike showed the importance of building worker solidarity across job type if labor had any hope of standing up to the bosses. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, interesting little bit. You know how the cons are saying, well, you know, we're going to stop at Roe. We're not going to go any further. No, it's just we're going to return it to the states. It's not a federal ban, even though Pence has come out and said that he wants a federal ban on abortions, and the Republican leadership has come out. Yeah, we want to federalize this, even though we believe in states' rights. Never mind. Don't look behind the curtain. Evidently, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt has vowed that any of you local people, because remember, Republicans are supposed to believe in local governance. They're against the idea of big government intrusion. Now the Attorney General, which again, this is why Republicans have gone to the state level and have taken over attorney generals and state legislatures so they can impose their will on you and me. But they're saying, look, what Eric Schmidt is saying is if any city or county or anywhere in Missouri uses 1 red cent of tax money on abortions, he's going to sue them. He's going to sue them. Now, from what I understand, again, this is what conservatives do amazing. It's really incredible at how forward thinking they are. Because it's my understanding that, well, they don't do this. There's nowhere that this is happening. This is where conservatives are brilliant in setting a discussion, going, they're going to start using tax dollars they're going to kill the babies with your money, and get people all lathered up in the panties, knowing it isn't happening and it's not going to happen. But they get to make these declarative statements. They get to start an issue. They get to get people all riled up for what is not happening and not a big deal. They're making a huge thing. Think about the transgender sports thing. What we're talking about, a handful of cases across the country, and you've got the entire country losing their mind on the political right over what is really nonsensical. We're talking about a handful of cases. Now, the hope is that the sane, rational, for instance, my eldest daughter dragged my other 2 kids to an abortion protest today. Good on her. Finally, it's taken it. I could never get her. I used to drag her to everything. I could never get her active. This has activated even my daughter, who had no political interest whatsoever. Even with me doing what I do, nothing. I had taken her to rallies. We've met Congress people. We've met presidential candidates. She's had access to all this stuff. Not a concern in the world. This issue is different. This issue's personal. This issue's got her looking forward to voting. And I think her generation fired up in ways that I think the Republican dog going to kind of be worried about. And you look at the latest AP NORC poll saying, this abortion issue and women's rights kind of growing as an issue among people, kind of important. Oops, I think you smacked the hornet's nest and probably could end up paying the cost, because Republicans aren't going to be able to stop. They can't just take this win. No. They got to go all the way. For instance, Mean Gene Schmidt, Ohio State Representative. Mean Gene, she's the one who said no rape, no incest. You got to have the kid because it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. Yes, that 12-year-old being raped by her stepfather or uncle, or it's an opportunity for her to. I don't know what the hell that is, but it's an opportunity according to Mean Gene. But she has said that she's entertaining the debate whether to outlaw birth control. This is a very powerful state representative in Ohio, former congresswoman. They're not going to stop with just this. Now, here's the other part of this. They need the outrage. They need the anger. They need to rile their base. I'm looking at Michigan, much like Missouri. I'm looking at Michigan. They got a gubernatorial candidate who, again, wants attention. And I'm not mentioning his name just because not giving him attention. But he did have a bunch of House Republicans with him. They announced a new piece of legislation that they say is going to empower parents to be able to sue their schools and expose the outrage of teachers exposing their children to drag shows. Because, I'm thinking there was one idiotic teacher that said, "Hey, I think we'll have a drag show as a school function," which I don't understand. I think it's stupid. That happened just not too far from here, from what I understand. This now has given the entire conservative movement the opportunity to now say, it's happening everywhere. We have to stop this invasion of drag shows into our schools. And they're proposing a $10,000 fine. And they're proposing parents be able to sue the school district, I think it's for $10,000. So it's kind of like a bounty hunter thing. So if you're keeping an eye on your kid's school and you catch them having drag shows, or what you construe a drag show, you can win $10,000. It could be the $10,000 drag show conviction prize. This is what they do masterfully. Again, happened once somewhere, maybe, and they blow it into this huge, it's the end of the world. And we can't keep falling for this. We can't keep justifying what they do. We've got to be thinking in the same vein of, hey, how do we make sure that we push policies that are going to make people's lives better? This is where, I look at New York right now. New York is moving forward on a piece of legislation that's going to get, they've moved forward. They're going to try and get abortion rights in their state constitution. And I'm like, that's great. You know when you should have done that? Oh, I don't know, 1978? Should have done that, I don't know, anytime in the last, 50 years. But good on you for thinking about it now. Good on you for going in that direction now. And finally, need to get better at this game. Need to get better at the messaging. Need to stop falling in the pitfalls and need to move forward and explain why. That's nonsense. It's like oh my gosh, there are people who want to be cats and we're putting litter boxes in classrooms. And for 6 hours, everyone was losing their mind over litter boxes in classrooms, only to find out no litter boxes in classrooms. They lied to us again and again and again. They lie to us all the time. And there's never any accountability. Back in the old days, and I kind of remember it, when you would lie to a reporter, that was a bad thing. You didn't usually recover from it. Now it seems, especially from our friends on the political right, lying is stock in trade. If you don't lie enough, you're out. Bizarre, strange times. And again, I blame us. We got to get better at this. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Max Burns is going to be here to share some thoughts on the most recent outrage, something I'm kind of upset about. Stick around. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That was the day 1,800 streetcar drivers and motormen walked off the job at New Orleans Public Service. The Amalgamated Association of Street and Electric Railway Employees, Division 194, had been in contract negotiations for months. They demanded higher wages, a closed shop, and an end to arbitrary discharges. The company was looking to bust the Amalgamated with the creation of a company union. For the first few days, the strike was quiet. But then, on July 5th, the company brought in strikebreakers. 10,000 union members and their supporters gathered to stop scab service. The company attempted to run a lone streetcar down Canal Street. Immediately, it was pelted with bricks and stones. The scab driver bailed. Another 4 cars attempted to leave the car barn. Pitched battles raged for hours with police and scabs. 2 union men were shot and killed by scabs and hundreds more injured. Trade unions throughout the city threatened a general strike. The strike raged on for 2 months. Throughout the summer, trolleys were burned to the ground, tracks destroyed, switches cemented in place. As the weeks wore on, conditions became more desperate. That's when Clovis and Beanie Martin, former Division 194 conductors, decided to help out. They had since left public transit to open the Martin Brothers coffee stand and restaurant. They declared to their former union brothers, quote, "We are with you, heart and soul. We are with you till hell freezes over." They offered free supersized sandwiches for the poor boys. The strikers would eventually win some of their demands. The sandwiches would become a standard in New Orleans cuisine, better known as the Po' Boy. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
What's the most damning thing about America's healthcare system? The system. While our doctors, nurses, and technicians are among the best in the world, the system itself is not even designed for care, but for the constant expansion of profits for insurance giants, drug makers, hospital chains, system managers, financiers, and other voracious components of the medical industry. For starters, ponder that term, medical industry. The ethical essence of healthcare is that it's a human right, essential to every person and to the common good. But corporate elites now claim to own our health by shriveling the concept of care to just another product available to those who can pay whatever monopolistic industrialists demand. But this rationing of care meant the industry was leaving a mass market of millions of patients untapped. So industry bean counters made a critical adjustment. Lower prices? Don't get silly. Instead, the system is pushing medical debt as the ticket to care. So you come in sick or injured, scared, dazed, and suddenly you're hooked up to a long-term medical payment plan. A recent survey by the Kaiser Family Foundation revealed that more than 100 million Americans, including 41% of all adults, are in hock because of the skyrocketing costs of the so-called care industry. This includes debt that patients owe directly to the system, plus money borrowed from family or friends or put on credit cards. An analysis in 2019 estimated that families were being hit with at least $195 billion in payments for medical borrowing, a number driven dramatically higher since the pandemic. As one doctor angrily said of industrial health care, debt is no longer just a bug in our system, it is one of the main products. We have a healthcare system almost perfectly designed to create debt. This is Jim Hightower saying, how sick is that?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're going to file this one under the, hey, thanks, Joe Manchin. Evidently, the governor of Kentucky rightfully outraged, as I am as well. This is one of those things where I go, Joe Biden, Joe, if you're listening, why? Part of me goes, I get it. When you can't control the people in your party to do what you need to get done, if you can't move your agenda, you do have to make deals with the devil. And evidently, this idea that, again, another moment of Democrats playing checkers and Mitch McConnell playing chess. There is a deal, from what I understand, to appoint an anti-abortion Republican to a federal judgeship in Kentucky in exchange for something, not quite sure what it is yet. So I'm not really 100% sure, but I don't care what it is. Unless it's bringing Roe back and inculcating it into law for all of eternity, there's no way to justify putting a anti-abortion judge on a federal bench for lifetime. Just my thoughts, and here to share some thoughts on this. and some other stuff that we can bang around. I've asked our good friend Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist and also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. You can check out his work over at thedailybeast.com. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of this? Look, I saw the story. I read through it. I'm like, boo! I mean, that was basically my reaction going, this Joe Manchin, because this is Joe Manchin's fault.
No, it absolutely is. And in a sick kind of way, you almost have to give Mitch McConnell some credit. I mean, Democrats control 2/3 of the federal government, and the guy's still appointing judges. I mean, Republicans control the legislative agenda in the majority. They control it in the minority. And there's just no sense among Kristen Sinema, among Joe Manchin, that all of this short-term self-interest is leading to a whole system collapse here. Like the gain to Joe Manchin is a couple years where we're losing the judiciary here for a generation.
Losing? I would say that ship has sailed. I would say it's
maybe
already
I'm being
lost.
a little optimistic.
No, I say it's sailed because you look at the Supreme Court rulings here recently, all bad. And look, I think next term things get even crazier and even worse because, well, I think the signaling that's going out from people like Clarence Thomas of calling for all of the things that most people thought were long decided, long settled law. He said, look, hey, crazy people, we're open for business. Bring your insanity. We're willing to throw out 100 years of decided law for you. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, when these Republicans said that they believed that all these precedents were settled law, maybe settled law just didn't mean what we thought it meant because it's going out the window with remarkable speed. I mean, we've seen in just the last 2 weeks, multiple decisions bringing prayer back into public schools, Miranda rights being weakened. We've seen abortion overruled. We've seen the EPA essentially gutted in its ability to regulate greenhouse gases. And next session, they're going to come for a lot of other things. They're going to come for gay marriage issues. They're going to take another shot at weakening Miranda or throwing it out entirely. I mean, we are looking at a rollback. Most Americans won't recognize the world that they now have to live in.
Yeah, I mean, but I have friends who are like, yeah, this is the world we want because this is the religious zealot world. This is the Christian Sharia law world that I was worrying about 10 years ago. While, the Rick Santorums of the world were screaming around, Islamo-fascist, Sharia law. I'm going, yeah, I'm as afraid of them as I am of you and your ilk. And now, well, they're firmly in control. The American Taliban has taken over our Supreme Court.
And there is, to an extent, I mean, Democrats in Washington treated these like things that were never going to happen. They fundraise off of losing abortion, but there were not that many Democrats in leadership who really felt that abortion was acutely at risk. I mean, they were writing op-eds saying, calm down, Roe versus Wade isn't going anywhere. I mean, well, oops, that was a bad call. And now we're met with total silence. I mean, this is a Republican Party that has organized for decades to fulfill these kind of big, ambitious reshapings of America. And Democrats have taken 2 weeks just to figure out what to say about it. I mean, they are quite frankly outclassed in this kind of strategic business.
Yeah. No, it took them 2 weeks to figure out what kind of fundraising email to send out because I got a lot of them. I got tons of fundraising email saying, hey, now we're going to fight. So let me ask you this, because there's going to be a shift on the right of all of those anti-abortion groups who have now caught the car and are eating the car. All of that money being spent on the anti-abortion movement is going to have to go somewhere. So they're going to move those people into another horrible cause. But doesn't this now give the left their kind of money machine of, hey, now we're going to fight for this? And because I guess I'm just being a little cynical that it just seems like it's really just about the money machines.
Well, I mean, it's a fundraising opportunity. More importantly, it's an organizing opportunity. But currently, it's none of those things because we can't even get a unified Democratic message that this is a crisis. We've essentially heard for the last week the White House shooting down idea after idea from activists and abortion advocates in the states. They sent Kamala Harris out to humiliate herself, pushing a a line on abortion that they immediately changed course on. This is not the way you mobilize a base. It's a way you show a base that you don't care about their issues. And unless we start talking about this, and more importantly, start acting on it, this is going to be a massive missed opportunity.
Yeah. Can we not send Kamala Harris anywhere?
It's a shame. It really is. I mean, she's trying her best to be a team player on this team and is quite frankly being sent out without clear guidance on what the White House believes. And I would be furious. I imagine she's not too pleased.
You see, but this is one of these moments where, like politics aside, this is where working people have to be stepping forward. This next election is that important. And this is where I think the grassroots organizing has to happen in the workplace, in the streets. Because understand, as you've laid out, there have been a bunch of horrible decisions. I'm hoping that people are finally, raising their heads and going, wait a minute, they're talking about fundamental structural change of our entire way of life and our entire society. Maybe we should not let that happen. And I'm hoping they'll come out to vote in November.
Yeah, this is a place where we can take a line from the labor movement right now. I mean, we're in a renaissance of labor organizing, and it's largely driven by young people, people of color, who have no previous sort of connection to this, but have built these coalitions that have won. And we ask in Washington, you hear Democrats ask, well, how can we organize around this issue? But they're not asking that question to the Democratic base that's doing successful organizing. I mean, the roadmap is here. We need to get outside of this Beltway media bubble and actually empower these people to make change on behalf of the party.
Well, understand. See, my view has always been the people who are in office, they're not leaders. They're tools. They're our representatives. They should be doing what we're telling them to do. And this is where the right is very different in their thinking. They build grassroots organizing. You go back to the Tea Party stuff. They built these Tea Party groups. I still know of that Glenn Beck's 912 group. There are people who still meet in that stuff because they figured out how to bring people together, and they did it how? I still remember an interview back from the 90s. A guy named Ralph Reed. You may remember his name, a Christian Coalition guy. He was asked, how did you and Jerry Falwell build the moral majority or whatever their crazy group was called? And he pulled out the SWOC handbook, the Steelworkers Organizing Committee's handbook, and he said, there it is. We've just basically followed labor's organizing principles. We talk to people, we bring people together, we organized at the grassroots, and it's what they did. They took over the churches, they took over the halls, they took over where people gathered, and that's how they organized. Hello, we can do that again.
That is exactly how Democrats win. I mean, if you think about it, every major successful progressive initiative from the Obama campaign on forward to Stacey Abrams now in Georgia, very openly says that she borrowed from labor organizing tactics and relational organizing and interest-based organizing and friend recruitment. And that won. I mean, that flipped the state of Georgia to Joe Biden, something that we may never see that state go for a Democrat again for the rest of our lives. So when we're asking how do we organize on abortion, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to go to the people who have been doing this and have them energize this party, because clearly the people at the top are out of ideas.
Yeah, no, you need to get out in the streets where the people are. That's what you need to be doing. It's that simple. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Max Burns, Democratic strategist, columnist over at the Daily Beast. Make sure you check out his work at thedailybeast.com. I want to change topics real quick. I guess Merrick Garland's going under the knife, having surgery. Enlarged prostate. Is this going to hold him back from not making a decision on what happens with the January 6th committee? And I want to talk about that. But thoughts on Garland?
Yeah, I mean, this is really going to slow down the rapid pace of the Department of Justice's action, I guess, the large amount of nothing that's happened. But like, I wish him well, but like when he gets back, maybe he'll decide it's time to move on some of this clear evidence that's being presented every single day. I mean, it seems to just not be reaching the DOJ.
Yeah, but it's reaching the people, man. The Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, the bombshell testimony that was reached. What were they saying? Like 15 million people, well beyond what they thought it was going to, and that's not even counting the online numbers. Because I watched I watched online. I know most of the people that I know watched via different social media platforms, so they're not even counted. We're just talking about what was on the TV box there. But thoughts?
It's beautiful to me. Like this hearing, especially with Ms. Hutchinson, was incredible, and we're essentially leveraging Republicans' greatest addiction against them. They've become a party addicted to ratings, that the only thing that matters is how good your Fox News ratings are. And now we're using that tactic essentially in a bipartisan way to put forward these hearings to huge audiences. And I mean, what Cassidy Hutchinson said was mind-boggling. It was like a movie. And every couple of minutes, you would think it could not get crazier. And then the president is trying to steer a limousine with one hand and choking a guy with another. And people want to reelect this person. I mean, that is baffling to me.
But here's the thing, and this is what bothers me. That's what got the attention. The ketchup on the wall and him lunging in the car. That's what got all the attention. That's what the news media was focused on. Not on the fact that he thought Mike Pence deserved to be hung, Max. Not on the fact that he knew there were people in the crowd who were armed to the teeth, and he wanted to take the magnetic little displays down because he wanted people closer so that he could have a photo op. That Not so much. Ketchup on the wall, outraged. Got to do something about the ketchup, but the real blood in the streets, not so much.
Just from a factual position, it's damning. I mean, we now know from multiple sources that are under oath that the president knew people were armed, didn't care, knew that they weren't there for him, wanted to make sure that they knew to go to the Capitol, and encouraged people to tell them, since they were choosing not to attend his rally because they would have to surrender their weapons. So they thought, I'll just listen from outside and then go attack the government. And sitting in this limousine, we forget that the reason that he lunged for the wheel is because he was not being allowed to go join the rioters at the Capitol. He wanted to enter the Capitol building, walk into the House of Representatives chamber, which was already under siege at that point, and essentially give a campaign speech to the insurrectionists about how brave they were. I mean, that is a coup d'etat.
Yeah, and I wish the Secret Service would have let him do it.
I would love to hear from the Secret Service, and I imagine that we will. We just saw tonight news stories coming out from D.C. that these stories about Trump attacking his Secret Service agent, wanting to go rally the rioters to overturn the election, were circulating within the Secret Service for months.
Yeah,
and off the record, and that several reporters tried and failed to get additional people to share that on the record. Now that Cassidy Hutchinson has done it, I mean, that changes the game significantly.
But again, it's then the lie that came out. You had, the people give, no, that didn't happen, trying to discredit her. And look, then the actual truth, takes much longer to get out. We're just. So let me ask you as we move forward, because I'll tell you, I was a big detractor of the committee. I thought they took too long. I thought they should have been doing this well before. I thought it should have started on January 7th. I got to tell you, the way this has played out, the way this has been laid out, they have been methodical in their presentation. They have been thorough. They have done this in a way that I think probably only Liz Cheney could have done. I don't think any Democrats have had any input into the messaging that's gone into this, but I think they have prosecuted this in a very methodical way, in a very compelling way, and I'm actually spellbounding. I'm waiting for the next one. How much worse is it going to get? I think the bar is now raised even higher than the last one.
No, it is, and now these hearings are going into July, so we know that the GOP won't be able to outrun this. And you can see that it's having an effect. Republicans won't admit it, but, for example, Ginny Thomas said she would love to come and testify publicly. And then Cassidy Hutchinson started talking, and suddenly Ginny Thomas's lawyers said, change of plans. She's not coming anymore. And this raises the pressure on Mark Meadows specifically to come and testify, especially if the Secret Service comes to testify and corroborates these claims. I don't see how some of these people get out of of having to ultimately testify and make this case.
Yeah, I got to think that the rats are going to start scurrying very soon, or they're going to have to. I got to think that the rats are going to have to start looking for their exit or looking for their pardons. And look, my congressman, Scott Perry, he was one of those people allegedly looking for a pardon, and I don't doubt it. When you're in the middle of a treasonous act, you probably should look for an off-ramp. And this looks like a good one. I just love the fact that Trump didn't offer them a lifeline.
No, there was such an incredible moment where Cassidy Hutchinson and the White House counsel are trying to reach Mark Meadows to discuss the president needing to condemn this insurrection. And Mark Meadows tells them essentially, I need to get back to you. I'm writing my pardon request right now. And I mean, that's never something you want to hear at the end of your workday.
That should go on his tombstone. Writing my pardon request. Pardon denied. Here's the thing, and this is where we'll end this. It would be laughable. This would be like a Keystone Cops for treason, like a good dummies, a treason for dummies novel. If it weren't so serious, and if it didn't cost lives, and it didn't put our country in such peril, didn't put the globe in such peril, it would all be laughable if it weren't so deadly.
Yeah, and I laugh because I still am not convinced that the Department of Justice will take this step. I mean, they keep making clear that they are very nervous about being perceived as a politically motivated trial, essentially, of charging a former president. And as long as they're more concerned about the politics than the law,
yeah,
all we can do is laugh because the people with power do not seem to see this as a crisis.
Yeah, and they know they're never going to be held accountable. But Max, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Our good friend Max Burns. Make sure you check out his work over at thedailybeast.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Remember, if you got a thought, question, comment, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or check out the podcast. Never miss an episode. Subscribe, like, share. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1983. That was the day that began a 3-year struggle by copper workers in Arizona. The contract for 13 unions in the mining towns that included Clifton and Morenci had expired. Many of the workers were Latino. The employer, Phelps Dodge, used every tactic they could to break the strike. The workers and their families were harassed, evicted from their homes, under constant police surveillance, and arrested. Even though the contract guaranteed continued medical benefits, the company stopped health care for those on strike. To make matters worse, the company brought in scabs to replace the striking miners. On August 19th, the governor of Arizona sent a massive military convoy, including tanks and helicopters, to the work sites. Despite this overwhelming show of force against them, the strikers persevered. The wives set up a free medical clinic and organized to provide food and other needs for the striking families. Soon they joined their husbands, fathers, and brothers on the picket lines. The women traveled to give speeches and raise money. Finally, after 3 long years of struggle, the workers in the mines, predominantly the scabs brought in by the company, voted to decertify the union, thus ending the strike. Barbara Kingsolver wrote a moving book on the struggle called Holding the Line: Women in the Great Arizona Mine Strike of 1983. In the preface of the book, she warns, "Watch your back, America. Take civil liberties for granted at your own risk. Trust in leaders who arrive into power by means of wealth and see who they protect when push comes to shove. What happened in Arizona could happen again, and it will, somewhere to someone. It will happen again and again if we do not open our eyes and believe what we see." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So if you need something to be outraged about, because the right does this masterfully. Today's outrage was the liberal world order. Like I said, I got tons of emails from crazy people. What do you want to say about that? Evidently, though, in Texas, there were a group of educators that proposed to the Texas State Board of Education. Now, understand, the reason that this is important is Texas is like the driver of all textbooks in this country because they're such a huge buyer of them. So they get outweighed influence over what gets into textbooks, which is why people pay attention to the Texas State Board of Education. But they proposed to the board that slavery should be taught not as slavery. Now, again, this is for second grade social studies, but not slavery, because slavery has bad things because it makes people feel bad, but as involuntary relocation. Let that sink in for a second. Yes, the Trail of Tears, that was involuntary. Oh, Jesus. I wonder how my religious friends would feel if Jesus wasn't crucified. He wasn't, forced to, to carry the cross. He was involuntarily, pathed towards being, I don't know, involuntarily, nailed to a piece of wood. Wow. Crazy. I mean, there are moments when you go, how far will they go? They'll sanitize anything. Because, again, we have to feel. I learned about slavery in school. I don't think it scarred me for life. I didn't feel discomfort that I remember. But this idea that we have to stop our children from feeling discomfort is kind of silly, kind of insane. And this is where I think we as society, have to have some pretty hard conversations with each other. And I don't know that we can do that. Because while the right points their finger at the left and goes, "Oh, you and your feelings," the right, they're just as big as snowflakes as the left. And for me, we got to toughen up and have real conversations and examine our history in ways that are going to be uncomfortable, and talk about reality, and talk about how we do move forward as a multicultural country. Because guess what? We are. Like it or not, we're a multicultural country. You're gonna have to figure out how to deal with multiple types of people, and we've done that in the past. We've done that, and we've done well. When we've followed some pretty simple things, and I go back to my grandparents' generation. My grandfather said, "Don't worry about me, worry about yourself. Take care of your business. I'll take care of mine. We'll be good. Don't you stick your nose into my stuff. I won't stick my nose into your stuff. We'll be all right." Problem is, we got too many do-gooder, crazy people out there who they point their finger and say, "You have to do what I want you to do," and they get offended when you don't. I've always believed life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Pursue your happiness. As long as it doesn't infringe on mine, we're good. If we did a little bit more of that, we'd be all right. Love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Also, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss an episode. Subscribe, like, share. Wherever you get your favorite podcasts, it will most certainly be there.
So while the Supreme Court case is very important, it's not the only game in town.
Right-wing Supreme Court strikes major blow to EPA's ability to regulate carbon emissions. Residential natural gas stoves leak carcinogens even when turned off, study finds. Plus, clean energy jobs are booming. Fossil fuel jobs are shrinking.
All of those booms and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Getting to a wedding costs an arm and a leg. Gas is so expensive, you can bring it as a wedding gift.
This is your Green News Report.
And make sure you hold on to it, though. Your grandkids can sell it to a warlord for water.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the day that we have long predicted, long feared would come, has now arrived.
As expected, the right-wing supermajority on the stolen and packed U.S. Supreme Court has issued a disturbing landmark ruling in West Virginia versus EPA. That's a lawsuit brought by Republican attorneys general over emission standards that never took effect. The 6-3 majority ruled that despite the Clean Air Act's broad textual mandate, the EPA does not have the authority to regulate carbon dioxide emissions from power plants, because Congress didn't explicitly say regulate carbon emissions. The decision kneecaps the agency at a critical time when scientists warn the window is closing to act to prevent catastrophic climate impacts. It throws a wrench into new standards being developed by the Biden administration. However, in an interview with Sky News before the ruling, EPA Chief Michael Regan said the agency has other tools.
The president has a number of tools in his toolbox. And as we look at all of the regulations that govern power plants, we have regulations that look at traditional air pollutants, water pollutants, and coal ash or, hazardous waste cleanup. So while the Supreme Court case is very important, it's not the only game in town.
Well, good luck with those other tools. Given what the Supreme Court has decided, it's clear to me, at least, that they are also going to handcuff the agency on those other rules as well.
Yes, the ruling is the pinnacle of Republicans and their funders' decades-long corrupt coordinated scheme to stack the court and handcuff the EPA from issuing future climate and pollution regulations. And it can also be used to gut the government's ability to regulate corporate behavior in other sectors.
There is a reason I don't call these right-wingers conservative. They aren't conservative at all. They are radicals.
And it matters because climate research shows that man-made global warming has now escalated the risk of compound disasters that interact with self-reinforcing feedbacks. A new study has found that extreme dryness in the U.S. West's man-made megadrought boosted hot temperatures by 4 degrees last summer, intensifying both heat waves and wildfires, with greater cascading impacts together than each disaster on its own.
So it's all getting terrible all at once.
A different study finds that most U.S. cities are seeing more extremely hot days overall than in the past because of global warming. More than half of U.S. cities now see at least 7 more extremely hot days than in the 1970s, with the hottest summer temperatures arriving much earlier and persisting later into the fall. In other news, new scientific research shows that residential natural gas stoves leak carcinogens, including benzene and 20 other toxic air pollutants that are linked to birth defects and cancers, and they do it even when turned off.
So that is the clean natural gas we hear so much about?
So-called.
Nice.
This is the first study to document additional pollutants included in the natural gas that's piped into homes, part of a growing body of research identifying natural gas as a significant source of indoor pollution.
Electrify, please.
But some good news. In Oklahoma's Republican Senate primary this week, Trump's wildly corrupt, scandal-plagued first EPA director, Scott Pruitt, lost his bid for the U.S. Senate to replace retiring climate science denier Senator James Inhofe. And he lost badly.
So there's that, at least.
And finally, jobs in the U.S. renewable energy sector rose faster than overall U.S. employment in 2021, and it made up for job losses in the fossil fuel industry, even as fossil fuel production increased. The Department of Energy's annual jobs report out this week detailed dramatic growth across the entire clean energy sector in 2021 and found that the fossil fuel extraction industry lost more than 31,000 jobs, while the electric vehicle sector alone created 45,000 jobs, a stunning 25% increase over the previous year.
So there's that as well. We'll take what we can get. Thank you very much. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we could not get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, lots of email on the new world order that the right is so crazy about. And, you know, by not being involved in the rest of the globe, by us being isolationists, and this is what I'm finding hysterical about the right-wing attacks today on the Biden administration. I think what they want is they want Biden to do nothing on international affairs and just to do like Trump did, leave a massive void around the world so that the Chinese can take over. And of course, the Russians and Europe as well. It's very bizarre to me. And we're in this moment where, yeah, we've got to be doing some things here at home, but you still got to play in the international world. And if we're going to do anything, taking on China, probably a big part of that. And if you look at some of our supply chain issues, our inflation issues, I argue it's been our trade policies, it's been our bad policies with China, it's been our horrible policies with China. And here to share some thoughts on, well, just how bad it is and maybe what we can do a little bit about it here on the short term. I've asked Emily Delabruyere to come talk with us. She is the co-founder of Horizon Advisory. HorizonAdvisory.org is their website. They work on this issue pretty importantly, the most recently quoted in the New York Times article on our supply chain. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with there. The Chinese, I have a lot of people telling me that what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, the Chinese are instrumental in. They're probably going to decide how that's going to play out. I wanted to get your thoughts on that scenario.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the China-Russia partnership has been strong for, I think, far longer than the U.S. is willing to acknowledge. And Beijing is absolutely behind and remains behind Russia's offensive in Ukraine. The next beat from all of this is that China is profiting off of what's going down, right? So energy is the classic example, but as the rest of the world struggles to obtain energy, as you know, national gas prices are averaging around $5 a gallon here, because of what Russia's doing in the Western response to it, China's continuing to buy energy from Russia at rock bottom prices and claiming a position of influence in the international system. And I mean, that's jumping 2 steps ahead of your question, but the short of it is, yeah, this is a tight partnership. And not only is China encouraging what's going down, but it's also positioning to be the one that takes advantage of it.
And I would argue that a big reason that they're doing it is they understand that weakens us. They're taking every chance they can get, every advantage they can get to attack us, because ultimately what's going on in Ukraine for them is a proxy war against us, I believe.
Absolutely. And because we're distracted, we can't process 2 things at once. So we're like, there's Russia on this side and China on this side. And even though these problems are absolutely combined and it's one fundamental issue in our being the US perspective, it's like, oh, we need to deal with Russia. And because we're dealing with Russia, we can't deal with China. So we're distracted, we're weakened, we have all these new political pressures. And we're absolutely failing to recognize that all of them stem from the same fundamental reality, which is China, and China distorting the global system, and China distorting the global industrial system in particular.
Now, this brings us back to the energy situation. People are crazy over the gas prices. And look, gas prices are out of control. We're not used to $5 a gallon. But you go to Europe, the gas prices are almost double that. We haven't had the kind of energy inflation that the rest of the world is used to. We've been fairly privileged in that. And I've been arguing for years we need to get off of that stuff. And again, the fact that we haven't had the policies to move us away from this has strengthened China, I believe, and has put us in this spot. And I think has given us a major blind spot, especially politically, when now all we're focused on is gas prices, especially when we should have been moving away from this stuff a while ago. Now there's a rush to get electric vehicles. We're going to all move to electric vehicles. Yet we find out that a lot of the stuff that we need to get there sourced where? China, because we don't have the manufacturing base. We gave that all away. This has been the central complaint I've had for the 17 years I've been doing this show. We have given away our manufacturing capacity for profits for corporations and higher pay for CEOs.
That's exactly it. And it's so crazy because, what you just said, it's all the same thing, right? We keep coming up with these different, framings of the problem, right? In the Russia, the problem is the tax on gas, right? Most recently, or the problem is X, the problem is Y. The real problem is we're not investing in supply. And we didn't we stopped investing in supply of fossil fuels for whatever reason, but then we didn't respond with investing in supply for alternative energy sources. And every time we put a Band-Aid on the problem from the demand end or from a farther downstream end, but at no point are we actually sitting down and saying, oh, hey, let's build out domestic trusted supply chains of critical inputs and especially of energy. So it doesn't solve the problem if, as you said, we switch to electric vehicles, but aren't making the inputs for them here. It just exacerbates the problem in a different context. Across the board, what we as a country need to be doing is saying, hey, every part of an economy and therefore every part of national security and prosperity is based on having a source of supply. We don't have that. That's the problem. We may have failed or lost that in this previous industrial generation. Let's make it for the next industrial generation. We can do that. No, we're continuing just to source it from China.
No, and I look at something that we desperately need. We need computer chips desperately need them. The fact that it has taken so long to get Intel to start building that plant in Columbus, Ohio, is beyond me. And it's still in limbo, from what I understand, if it's ever going to happen, because I guess right now you've got Mitch McConnell holding the administration hostage over if they're going to use reconciliation to move part of Biden's Build Back Better plan. He's going to not support this bipartisan plan on China. And you go, wait a second. This is no way to run a lemonade stand, and it's no wonder we're getting our butts kicked internationally.
But also, we need to stop thinking that this one semiconductor bill is the end all be all, because that doesn't resolve the problem of where we're getting silicon, electronic grade silicon for the semiconductors. It doesn't resolve the problem that we're continuing to ship the relevant technology to China. In the same way that us having Teslas on the road doesn't solve the problem of where we're getting the inputs for electric vehicle batteries.
No, I completely agree with you, but I'm talking about this is just one plant. Yeah. We're talking about one thing. To do what we're talking about, the mass scale, to scale this up I'm sorry, I just think it's impossible. I think there's just no way we in this country at this moment in history are capable of that kind of Manhattan Project thinking, that kind of Marshall Plan type of thinking. I don't think we have it in us. I don't think we're that generation. I just don't think it's there.
But if we don't have that in us, what are we supposed to do? At that point, don't we just give up? Because that's what we need right now. And I don't see an alternative if it's not going to be a massive investment in domestic production and supply.
But here's the thing. This is what we're talking about is, the kind of stuff that I'm most passionate about. And when I go to meetings of activists because look, on the left, we got a lot of cause heads. Everyone's got their issue there. We're going to save the whales this week. We're going to save the turtles. We're going to, all great causes, all good things. But when you start talking about, hey, trade policy, hey, how about we make things here, eyes glass over. That's not this. And we lose people. How do we make this the central issue that connects all of those other things as well? Because look, I want to connect this to the abortion issue. I want to connect this to the fight in the courts, because I think all of this is connected. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, first beat is yes, absolutely, and that's the crazy thing. Every single issue that's tearing apart American society, I think, fundamentally comes down to this one question. And I used to say it's the China question. Now I think it's just a production question that's been exacerbated by China. But yes, this is economic inequality. It's the environment. It's inflation right now. Like, every single thing is a function of this. How do we do it? Like, I don't know. There is one silver lining or one piece of hope within the recent political landscape for me, and that's been the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and general action against forced labor in China, which is fantastic from a normative perspective, right? Because we don't want forced labor in our supply chains. Beijing is conducting a genocide in the Xinjiang region, and we're importing goods made by forced laborers who are victims of that genocide, and that's all bad. And then from a larger strategic perspective, maybe this is the kind of defensive action that in turn is going to encourage the equal and opposite reaction in proactive investment in domestic production. Because if we can't source goods from Xinjiang, which is what the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act effectively says, maybe that's what brings American markets to realize that we need to be sourcing goods from trusted ecosystems. I don't know. It's a shot in the dark, perhaps.
Yeah. No, look, I'm hopeful.
It is one positive indicator.
Yeah, no, I'm hopeful that this works, but I'm also going, China's really, really sly and clever and good at cheating. So all they do is just, we're just going to route this through somewhere else, and who knows who. And if we get caught, we'll route it through somewhere else after that, because we've been playing this whack-a-mole for, I don't know, the last 20 years. And we continue to let them off the hook time and time again, because what we end up having to do is, like in this moment, you've got people saying, no, we need to get rid of those tariffs, Emily. Those tariffs are causing the inflation. You have no idea how many emails I get from people going, it's you and your inflationary tariffs. Going, tariffs aren't causing the inflation. What are you talking about? It's gas prices because of what's going on in Ukraine with Russia. It's the fact that we've allowed corporate America to consolidate to where you got a handful of companies controlling entire industries. Why don't we start there? How about we start with decent trade deals? But you can't have those conversations.
100%. And also, just to go off on this one, ultimately the way that you resolve the inflationary crisis is tariffs, right? Because tariffs create the incentives to invest in domestic production. And if you invest in domestic production, then you have a more resilient industrial base. And so then ultimately you don't end up in this crisis, and we don't have a shortage of supply, which is what leads to inflation.
See? Thank you. Duh.
That would be a long-term solution, and we're totally blind to those because we're caught in this absolutely short-sighted cycle. Yeah.
I want my cheap stuff from Walmart again. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff.
Now.
This is how we've been trained as a society. Cheap, garbage in, garbage out. Instead of being able to say, look, there are real problems, but we can have real solutions. Policy got us into this mess. Smart policy can get us out of it.
And it's not that complicated, right? Because as we've now said this probably a million times, but fundamentally what it comes down to is the problem is that we're not investing in domestic production, and we are letting China hollow us out. So let's reverse that, and let's stop doing business with a company that's twisting the playing field. Let's stop doing business with a country that's relying on forced labor. Let's stop having our supply chains be controlled by a geopolitical adversary. And those are all relatively straightforward things.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because a lot of there have been potentially strong actions taken by the government to this end, but they're all on the defensive side. I go back to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act because that's a big, ray of light. That's still defensive. It says we're not going to import goods from this player. But the same goes for tariffs, the same goes for export controls. Like all of these are defensive means. They need to be paired with like the proactive partner that says, okay, here's the alternative. And let's invest in the alternative, and let's make sure China is not the only option at the same time as we dissuade our system from reliance on China. And that seems to be in particular where our system is failing, because we can have the one-off defense, but we're much worse at the actual proactive investment.
Right. So my friend Scott Paul always likes to remind me that while we're talking about investing something like $50 billion in creating a chip industry here in the U.S., and people's eyes are, oh my God, $50 billion. China's investing 3 times that amount. Are we talking about potentially doing that kind of direct investment into corporations and into the demand side of our production? What are we talking about doing?
Well, we're not going to be able to do it in the same model as China, because no matter how much we change, we're a more free market system. Our state doesn't control the economy the way China's does. However, we do need to be doing a similar, or drawing lessons from China's approach to create incentives for the private sector to invest domestically. And it's not going to be the government pouring the same amount of dollars as the Chinese government pours into this industry, because again, we're not government led in the same way.
Right.
But it does have to be saying, hey, companies, it's actually in your interest to invest in America and invest in American production. And we're going to remove some regulatory red tape, because there have to be lower barriers of entry, and we're going to give you positive incentives, and we're going to encourage scale, and we're going to encourage production, and at the same time we're going to discourage you from going to China. And like these are things that we can do, and we can do without pouring the same sums of money that China's pouring in, because we do still have the biggest private sector in the world. But that's an advantage that's slowly diminishing, or perhaps not so slowly diminishing. So that also makes it imperative that we do all of this now while we still can, and before we're at a point where Beijing has the largest private sector in the world, and the only way to compete would be becoming China, which we're not going to do anytime soon.
So you talk about lowering regulations and that stuff. What are you talking about? I mean, I hear we just lived through 4 years of a president saying we're gutting all the regulations. I'm generally opposed to cutting regulations. Taking a hatchet to regulations, because I understand that regulations save lives. What are we talking about when you're talking about regulatory relief, or what does that look like in your world?
Yeah, and I mean, it has to be done in a moderate, smart way. I think like rare earths are probably a good example of this. So if we look at critical inputs that the U.S. depends on and U.S. industry depends on, many of them are produced in incredibly dirty ways internationally. And we're okay with that because we've just moved them offshore, so we can close our eyes to all of the, dirty being like human rights, but also environment, any other problem in their production. And we still use them, and we still build on them, and therefore we still encourage those abuses, but we can close our eyes to it because it's internationally. We need those things made here, or at least in trusted areas, because if not, our entire industry is dependent on players like China. But that means that we have to make it possible to produce them here, which would mean, for example, having regulations for mining that are adjusted to a reality in which mining can take place in the US, but is done in more clean a way than it might be done in China. So it depends industry to industry, but it means having a realistic approach that doesn't just outsource the costs to players where they don't have any rules. So having it be possible for it to be made here, but possible.
I get what you're saying. We need to sit the environmentalists down in the corner and let the Koch brothers and the captains of industry rape and pillage. Is that what I'm getting?
That's not it. That's what's happening right now.
Okay.
Because we're outsourcing all the costs, right? So it's just pragmatic rules, and that was the environmental example. But there's also there's so many other regulations that risk getting in the way, and at a time of such shortage in supply, you can't afford those. But it's not so. China, for example, produces all of the world's polysilicon, and does so. And that's a critical input into solar panels. which are clean energy, except Beijing's making the polysilicon reliant on coal energy. And that's bad, or that's dirty, right? But we say these are solar panels, so they're green, and we discount the cost of all the coal. What happens if you say, let's try to make solar panels in the US? And that would come with energy emissions, because industry fundamentally has energy emissions, but they don't have to be made with coal energy going into the process. And so as we make our calculations about what regulations should be in play and what industrial emissions are acceptable or not acceptable, we should also be factoring in what the alternative is if we just offshore the costs.
So last question, any of this possible? I mean, I'm the pessimist here. Do you see what you're talking about as something that we can move on? Do you see in this political environment something as possible, given the fact that we got Joe Manchin? Do you see the potential of a movement, a grassroots movement? How do you see this going forward? Or are you gonna look at me and go, yeah, you're probably right, nothing's ever gonna happen?
I mean, I have to think it's possible, because if not, it's just all too sad. But I don't think it happens until we realize that, as you said, every other issue that we're trying to deal with as a country fundamentally comes down to this. And if that can happen, then yes, because then there will be the grassroots movement, and then the bipartisan recognition turns into bipartisan action. Maybe we can hope, but we're not there right now.
We're not there right now, sadly. But Emily, I appreciate you taking time for us. Hope folks will check out the website, horizonadvisory.org. You guys do fabulous work on this issue. I hope folks will check it out. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
As always, great stuff. I'm going to take a quick break, right back after this with your thoughts. Also, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Don't forget, grab the podcast, never miss a moment. Subscribe, like, share. Maybe share it with one of your MAGA hat wearing friends. They'd enjoy it. Quick break, right back. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
This, again, for me, the central issue to our entire country's ability to move forward. Jobs, manufacturing, building stuff, making stuff, our supply chains, all of this comes back to, this is the central issue, cause heads. This is what we should all be. All the other issues, yes, they feed into it. This is the issue. You go, well, how does this apply to abortion rights? It does. Look, you could probably have less abortions if people had the ability to think, hey, I'm going to be able to get a good union job that's going to pay a living wage that I'm going to be able to support a family on. Might be more willing to bring kids into this world. Maybe, who knows? Might even be able to get, health care with contraception that you could probably prevent if our crazy Republican friends don't go and make it illegal. Again, making people more active, more engaged, more politically savvy, all good stuff. But comes down to jobs. Comes down to people being less desperate. I think it gives us the ability to react in times of crisis so that we don't have these inflationary pushes when, our supply chain gets broken. This is the issue. This is the central issue of our time. Can we make the things we need? I say it all the time, domestic production for domestic consumption. It's what we need to be doing. And this is where I go with my conservative friends. This is where I go with my conservative friends often. Competition. What happened to the competition? What happened to the competition they used to talk about that they loved so very much? And yet they're the folks who are pushing for, well, more consolidation, more ownership by the few. Something wrong here. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1885. That was the day that streetcar workers went out on strike. The West Division Street Railroad Company had reduced the number of trips it made each day. The workers asked for a wage increase to make up for the loss of earnings. In response, management fired 15 union leaders. Outraged members of the city's labor movement rallied to the cause of the West Side Streetcarmen's Benevolent Association. Thousands of Chicagoans lined the company's tracks. Calls went out to revoke the company's charter. Mayor Harrison urged the company not to try and run their cars in the charged environment. But the company's management refused to listen. They demanded police protection to get their streetcars running. A police captain by the name of John Bonfield was assigned the task. Bristling with policemen, 10 streetcars rolled out into the crowd. Under Bonfield's orders, the police clubbed strikers and protesters along the tracks. When a group of bricklayers yelled "rats" at the passing cars, they were arrested. In all, 150 protesters went to jail that day. After 7 days, the strike ended in a compromise. The workers saw an increase in their wages, and all but 2 of the workers who had been fired got their jobs back. The action propelled Captain Bonfield's career as a strikebreaker. He became known as Captain Blackjack Bonfield. It was Captain Bonfield who led the police confrontation with workers at a rally the next year that sparked the Haymarket tragedy. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Too many big business CEOs turn out to be grifters, ripping off consumers, workers, and others. But the corporate con artists I consider most vile are those who profiteer on people's health care needs. We've had such infamous high-profile scammers as Medicare fraudster Rick Scott, Big Pharma price gouger Martin Shkreli, and the Sackler family of opioid pushers. Worse, though, we now face an industry-wide epidemic of insurers, hospitals, and others that are pushing higher costs onto patients, then systematically pushing those who can't pay the full inflated tab into debt schemes. With bloated interest charges, payments go on for years, and medical bankruptcies are soaring. The most significant statistic in today's avaricious world of healthcare finance is this: half of U.S. adults don't have the money to cover a $500 medical bill. Thus, as the system keeps jacking up its prices and profits, millions of families are forced by illness or injury into the dark valley of debt, inhabited by ruthless debt collectors employed by the medical establishment. But wait, you say, I have health insurance. Still, ever-increasing prices and out-of-pocket insurance requirements put you into debt, too. A recent Kaiser Family Foundation survey found that 6 out of 10 working-class adults with health coverage went into medical debt in the past 5 years. Most perversely, healthcare debt prevents many people from getting health care. 1 in 7 Americans say the corporate system has refused care to them because they have unpaid medical bills, and 2/3 say they've put off care because of the fear of crushing debt. As one expert puts it, the number 1 reason and the number 2 and 3 and 4 reasons that people go into medical debt is that they don't have the money. It's not complicated. This is Jim Hightower saying, to help stop healthcare industry's profiteers, go to ripmedicaldebt.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So with all of the Supreme Court stuff coming out, all of the horrible news, this November's election is becoming much, much more in focus, much more important. My state of Pennsylvania solidly on the map as we've got a TV quack doctor running for Senate. We've got a Nazi running for governor, and we don't seem to be that far out of the norm. Hey, congratulations. Welcome to America. Here to share some thoughts on, well, some of the fun and entertainment in our political sitcom in the giant S show that has been the 2022 election cycle. I've asked our good friend Tim Hogan to come talk with us. Tim is the executive editor over at Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com, their website. They are radio partners over at WCPT AM 820 in Chicago. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here, Rick.
So let's talk about my state of Pennsylvania. We've got a Nazi running for governor. He's running around all over the place. Very proud of the fact that he is 100% ready to make sure that Pennsylvania is a no abortion state for any reason whatsoever, under any circumstances, no matter what. He's very proud of that. Very proud of that.
I mean, he is, if you were to put together a lineup of some of the most extreme candidates that Republicans have nominated this election cycle, I think Doug Mastriano would be at the top of that list. He's a little bit like Ron Johnson, that he's made news on so many different wild fronts that some things you just miss. And I've said this before, but I am still curious. It's been over 90 days, maybe 100 days at this point, since he's said he's picked his Secretary of State candidate. And he won't tell anybody who it is. He says that it is someone who is an election expert, who has a national profile. Said before, that makes me think of Mike Lindell and scares me. But, you know, to the point of how important 2022 is for future elections, immediately for 2024, you know, we got news from the Supreme Court today that they're going to take up a case about independent state legislatures. And then also you have Doug Mastriano potentially appointing an election denier to be the chief elections officer of the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, I said that from the beginning. When they said he wasn't going to say, I go, we know who it is. It's either going to be the pillow guy, or it's going to be Rudy, or it's going to be Sidney Powell, or one of the other cabal of crazy who stood at the Four Seasons Landscaping Company to hold their big press conference. It's going to be one of those folks. Now the Senate race, interesting, because you had Dr. Oz, who was all about the MAGA man. He was all about wrapping his arms around the orange waist and, you know, digging his nose right in there. And now that he's won the primary, not so much at all. I mean, he's kind of moved a little bit away from the MAGA world.
Yeah, it's interesting. People have looked at the number of times that he's tweeted and referenced Donald Trump and the MAGA crowds, and he's a totally different person now that we're in the general, which is, I guess, not that surprising. Although some of these candidates, like a Doug Mastriano, believe so truly in the MAGA crowd that they're not going to change. But then you do have people like Dr. Oz who are more opportunistic, who you're going to hear strike a different tone and hope that everybody forgets. It's like a Romney Etch-a-Sketch moment, as he described it, that Dr. Oz is trying to make happen here. But we did, some reporting on him and the properties that he owns. He's, tries to cast himself as an anti-elitist, which is absolutely bonkers given his net worth and the mansions that he owns, but was talking about how, people, the elites, they are traveling around during COVID. They're able to escape some of these difficult times. That's not what most Pennsylvanians are doing. And then we looked, how many rental properties does he have? Okay, he has one in Turkey, one in New York City, one in Florida. And then, the perennial question of where exactly does he live in Pennsylvania still seems to be unanswered. I guess they closed on a property recently, but he's not living there. There's speculation that there's renovation happening and he's living with his in-laws. So, very much a carpetbagger for Senate running in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, is he going to? At least he's not going to buy a trailer in a trailer park that he never visits.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I just, the fact that the residency question has not been put to bed yet is malpractice on his part.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he's hoping nobody pays attention. I mean, he's hoping that the MAGA folks don't. And look, I don't think the MAGA folks care. As long as he's got the Trump seal of approval, he's got the orange on his nose. I think they're going to be just a-okay because, well, there's not much, a lot of thought there. Speaking of Pennsylvania, one of our congressmen got himself named recently, Mike Kelly, who it's always been interesting. Mike Kelly's never been a guy who I ever thought of would diminish his role in anything. But interestingly enough, he's asking the question, why would a lowly congressman somebody think a lowly congressman from Pennsylvania would have anything to do with anything? Because his name was brought up by Ron Johnson as the person who evidently gave him these fake electors. Tell me what's going on.
Right. Well, you remember the January 6th committee initially showed some text messages between Ron Johnson's chief of staff and an aide to Mike Pence, Vice President Pence. And the Johnson staffer said, hey, we want to deliver this folder of electors to the vice president, to which, kudos to the vice president staffer to be like, do not do that. We do not want that. But from there on out, since that was revealed, reporters have been trying to get to the bottom of this. Manu Raja, who works for CNN, caught Ron Johnson twice walking outside the Capitol in a single day. It's like, Ron, you got to find somewhere else to go. There's reporters sitting there and you do a really bad job every time he catches you. Maybe find a different escape route. But Ron's not that bright. So he asks him, where did this come from? And after bloviating and saying it's the non-story, why are you guys reporting on this? He says, well, it came from Representative Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania, and a House intern delivered it to us. I'm waiting for that House intern to come out of the woodwork, by the way, and clear their name. But Mike Kelly then says, I haven't talked to Ron Johnson since 2011, which is remarkable. But I would make a similar choice. So, there are more questions than answers right now about Ron Johnson's involvement in the delivery of these electors. There is some back and forth that his office actually put out, I believe, of him speaking with a Dane County attorney about getting these documents in the hands of the vice president. So, it's another day for Ron Johnson. It's another absolute mess. And then on top of all of this, I just want to say, goes pretty uncovered. He does the rounds on right-wing radio all the time in Wisconsin. And while this is happening, one right-wing radio host tells him that she believes that the Biden administration is preparing for a second pandemic during the midterms. And Ron Johnson doesn't bat it down, of course. He says, oh, yeah, I mean, these guys created a state of fear previously, so I guess I wouldn't trust them. So Ron Johnson is now on team the Biden administration's planning another pandemic.
All right, so
planning, the second pandemic here.
No, I mean this is the MO, but I find it interesting that Johnson just keeps digging himself deeper in this, and it's one of those things where had you told the truth from the beginning, you wouldn't have to keep making stuff up. Or maybe if you weren't involved in this kind of a seditious act, maybe you wouldn't have to keep making things up. Just kind of a thought.
Yeah, exactly. And the greatest thing about Ron Johnson too is he then will go on radio and do a circuit and say, this country's gotten so divisive, and that was his justification for running again, is that he wants to heal the country. So that's why he's doing all this, Rick. He just wants to heal the country.
Well, wait a second. So it's now heal the country. I thought it was because people were crying that he wasn't. I thought it was he was being drafted and there were people crying. What happened to the people crying?
It was I'm sure it was also very emotional. I think it's maybe both at once, but but it will be interesting to see what happens. We have a primary coming up in Wisconsin, still a month away. Theirs is in August, but you're seeing Alex Lasry, Mandela Barnes, Sarah Godlewski, Tom Nelson. It's a really contested primary there, and it's going to be late. And I don't think that's good for us that it's so late. But we'll see who emerges from that field to take him on.
Yeah. Now, in looking at all the things going on, I've got to think that the folks in Wisconsin have got to be looking at the nationals, especially what's going on with the people in the robes. This is not going to be boding well for the folks looking at Johnson, who is on team crazy. When you look at the former administration, is this playing in Wisconsin? Do you get a sense that what's coming out of the court is going to hurt him, or do you think it's going to help him?
I think it's going to hurt him. I think everything that is coming out of the court right now is a liability for Republicans at a time when they think that they've built some historic momentum because of, thermostatic conditions of what happens when one party controls the House, the Senate, and the White House, and also, economic struggles. But, when it comes to Wisconsin, the debate that they're having there right now is centered on an 1849 law, before women could vote, during a time when the legislation was written entirely by men, and which an OBGYN pointed out recently that there is one exception, which is for life of the mother, not for rape, not for incest. But in order for that to be signed off on, you need 3 physicians present to say, this person is sick enough in order for us to go forward with a procedure. And the question is, well, if you're in a rural area, you're diagnosed with an ectopic pregnancy, and it's late, where are you going to find those other doctors?
Yeah.
So there are, who would have thought that maybe the 1849 law is not, super reflective of where we need to be. But I think it's a liability because I think it motivates a lot of people to reconsider what's happening, that you're having rights stripped away. It's crazy. And
the other part of this is it's not really, the life of a mother argument. That's a defense. That's not medicine. That's when a doctor then makes a decision, that's now a defense that they may have to make down the road because you're going to have a overzealous prosecutor coming after them. That's not really warm and fuzzy for doctors. And again, this is where I go back to, and I talked about this the other day. I remember, because I have a memory, my conservative friends, whining and complaining about the dreaded Obamacare and how you're putting, government and people between the patient and the doctor. Isn't this kind of putting, the government between a woman and her doctor? Oh, that's right. It's just women. Never mind. Sorry. Never mind. Not a big deal, right?
Yeah. And like this whole, look, we'll kick it back to the states. The states will deal with it. We've been watching legislators through this last session very closely in, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Dakota, name your Midwest states. All of these legislators, you're not handing it back to the states. You're handing it back to a bunch of extremists who have gerrymandered themselves into positions of power where they can't be challenged. And they're passing extreme laws. Illinois, Minnesota, there are going to be a couple states that are islands of abortion access in the Midwest. And there are going to be providers, geographically very clustered that not everybody's going to be able to get to. Not everyone's going to be able to access safely.
Yeah, this is we're in for some interesting times ahead. And now I have some of my conservative friends. Well, this is what you should want this, Rick. This is what democracy is about. Sure, the pendulum has swung, but you can organize and you can have the pendulum go the other way. And I go, is this what we want the country to be? The pendulum swinging from extreme crazy to extreme to the others? Do we really want that kind of banana republic extremism? I don't.
Yeah. Right, and I don't know that it's even necessarily a question of swinging from left to right ideologically. It's more like the clock gets set back, time-wise, and we have to refight a fight that, grandmothers right now, their granddaughters are going to have to fight a fight that they had won, and that's the big issue here. Is like we are just turning back clock. Senator Amy Klobuchar, I think, says it well, given the laws that are going into effect in some of these states. It's not back to the 1950s. It's back to the 1850s, literally, in Wisconsin. That is where we're going.
No, I say it all the time. They want to take us back to the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s. You're absolutely right. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Tim Hogan. Tim is the executive editor over at Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com, their website. Check that out. They are our partners over at AM 820 WCPT there in Chicago. Lastly, I wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on in Minnesota. You've got Mike Flynn, who, pled the fifth. Very, 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 I guess not something that whole peaceful transfer of power thing he's willing to comment on, but took the fifth. Are we surprised by him taking the fifth? Let's start there before we get on to the next thing. Are we surprised?
I'm not a lawyer. But I just didn't see that there was vulnerability in the question where you might be incriminating yourself as to whether or not you believe in a peaceful transition of power. Like that seems like it's a pretty basic question. But again, not a legal expert here.
Yeah, but evidently, very shortly after that came to light, he has now put out an endorsement of this Doug Wardlow. Is this a big deal? Is this going to carry any weight? Does this matter in this moment? Thoughts?
It's really interesting what's happening in Minnesota. So the state GOP there endorsed Jim Schultz. He's a relatively newer guy. Doug Wardlow, he ran against Keith Ellison, the attorney general here in 2018, and he lost. He's trying it again in 2022. For those who don't know him, he is a MyPillow employee. So there's that. He is Mike Lindell's general counsel in Minnesota. And to have Mike Flynn, plead the fifth on a question like that. And then the next day, if you're on the Wardlow campaign, you're thinking, we got to get this endorsement out. This is perfect timing. He's running to be the chief legal officer for the state of Minnesota. He's running to be the attorney general, the enforcer of laws in the state. And after that performance, you want to put out this endorsement? I mean, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
You might be a little desperate.
Timing, kind of everything. Yeah, that's it. That does send a really good message. Yeah, I want to be the chief guy, but hey, we're going to take the guy. Yeah, I kind of get that. But here again, I mean, I guess, like I say, even a drowning man's going to grab an anchor. This is kind of that, right?
It is absolutely that. I mean, he's in trouble. And look, like the opponent, Jim Schultz, is also no good option. The whole slate for the Minnesota GOP, starting at the top with Scott Jensen, who's a gubernatorial candidate, they are extremists when it comes to abortion access. Scott Jensen got interviewed. He said that the only exception that he would be willing to endorse or wanting to endorse again is the life of the mother. And I think people sometimes think about Minnesota as a pretty blue state. We haven't elected a Republican statewide in over a decade. It's been a very long time, but you get the wrong conditions and you could lose the governor. You could lose the attorney general. Our state houses are split right now, so they only need to pick up one of those state houses, and then it's an entirely new ball game, and we find ourselves clawing back again, trying to undo what they did. And I think I feel good about the party in Minnesota. They're very organized. They're very well resourced. They're run very well, but it's going to be a scary 2022. That's for sure.
Yeah, let's hope. I mean, this, and I don't mean to sound hyperbolic, and I hope I'm not being hyperbolic, but this is a really important election. This could be the last, given the fact that the Supreme Court is taking up, or maybe taking up this case that could end how we do our federal elections by handing it over to state legislatures. I just very, very scary stuff. But Tim, I appreciate the time, the work that you guys do there at Heartland Signal. Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Tim Hogan. Make sure you check out the work that they do, heartlandsignal.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can check out that stuff. Good stuff. We're going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1885. That was the day that streetcar workers went out on strike. The West Division Street Railroad Company had reduced the number of trips it made each day. The workers asked for a wage increase to make up for the loss of earnings. In response, management fired 15 union leaders. Outraged members of the city's labor movement rallied to the cause of the West Side Streetcarmen's Benevolent Association. Thousands of Chicagoans lined the company's tracks. Calls went out to revoke the company's charter. Mayor Harrison urged the company not to try and run their cars in the charged environment. But the company's management refused to listen. They demanded police protection to get their streetcars running. A police captain by the name of John Bonfield was assigned the task. Bristling with policemen, 10 streetcars rolled out into the crowd. Under Bonfield's orders, the police clubbed strikers and protesters along the tracks. When a group of bricklayers yelled "rats" at the passing cars, they were arrested. In all, 150 protesters went to jail that day. After 7 days, the strike ended in a compromise. The workers saw an increase in their wages, and all but 2 of the workers who had been fired got their jobs back. The action propelled Captain Bonfield's career as a strikebreaker. He became known as Captain Blackjack Bonfield. It was Captain Bonfield who led the police confrontation with workers at a rally the next year that sparked the Haymarket tragedy. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So clearly going to be an interesting election cycle. And I hate sounding hyperbolic. And this is one of those things where, I've talked it over with my kids. And, this is a historic moment. And that, I've never been this kind of focused on how important elections are as I am right now. The reality is the way our Supreme Court is ruling, nothing is sacred. There's no decided law. There's no stare decisis. There's nothing. There's no precedent. There's none of that. They are willing to overturn anything and everything that they view as ideologically in opposition to what they view as original intentist, if you will. And they are going to undo the 20th century. That is not being hyperbolic. And if you liked the 1880s and the 1870s, if you liked that kind of gilded era, you like that kind of boom bust kind of economy, you like that kind of, it's the Wild West of politics, and who has the most money wins, then hey, we're going down the right path. And this is where the important part of this, and this is where we've got to figure out how to heal the divides in the working class. Because, and I've said this before, the place that we have to organize, and this is where labor has to figure this out. This is where political organizations need to figure this out. This is where women's rights groups and consumer groups and everybody who's got their little silo had better figure this out, and quickly. The workplace is where we need to be starting to organize the most. This is where the effort needs to be, because this is where people have the least amount of power. We need to be pushing corporate America in the right direction. We need to be getting a fair share of the wealth that people are creating, and we need to be organizing around the idea of democratizing the workplace, even if, look, what's happening in society is not. The fact that we just had a Supreme Court that took rights away from our citizens should infuriate people. And, we'll see come November what the fallout is going to be. Now, the right wing, they're projecting, it's going to be a giant red wave. We're going to take over the House and the Senate. It's going to be great. Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking at the Senate landscape. I'm guardedly optimistic that the Democrats are going to hold on to the Senate, especially here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, the possibility of picking up a seat here, the possibility of picking up seats in other places. I'm guardedly optimistic because the Republican Party has just gotten so extreme. And this is where the hope that there are still some moderate Republicans left. That there are still some folks going, this brave new world of taking us back 100 years, this brave new world of the elite oligarch running this country, this isn't where we should be going. That's what I'm hoping comes. I'm hoping there's a wave. I'm hoping it's red, but I'm hoping it's red with Republicans and these bad ideas being slaughtered, and us turning away all of the horrible that's coming. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We are living moments. We are living history. This is what I tell my kids all the time. Look, your grandchildren are going to be asking you about this. So take notes, because they're going to have questions. You're going to need answers. And how are you going to answer? Are you going to answer that you just sat by and did nothing? Or are you going to answer, hey, I fought the good fight? Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.